Selectmen's meeting for January 23rd, 2019 to be open. First item on the agenda is the public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Appears that there's no one here for public comment. Next item on the agenda is review of the minutes for January 9th, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. And I was almost remiss again, as I have been in the case of Mr. Gahn for several weeks, that we should observe a moment of silence for Mr. Bernie Gahn, who was a basketball coach at Clinton High School, a teacher at Clinton High School for many years, and died a few weeks ago. And Mr. John McNamara, who was a fire captain in the Clinton Fire Department and also a member of this board. And so if we could just acknowledge their passing with just a short moment of silence. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a utility pole installation public hearing for Park Street. Is there anyone here from National Grid? There is, okay. So, National Grid wishes to put in a new utility pole at Park Street beginning at a point approximately 55 feet southwest of the center line of the intersection of Beacon Street in Clinton. It will be installed directly between existing poles number 3 and 4 on Park Street. And sir, if you would identify yourself and then do your presentation.
Sure. Hi, my name is Javier Morales. I'm here representing National Grid, as you mentioned, to request a grant of approval for a pole location at the coordinates you mentioned. And this will be for used to upgrade our system to aid in reliability and customer restoration.
Okay. Any questions from members of the board?
Just one, Mr. Chair. The P35, is that where the prospective pole is going?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Nope.
This is a public hearing, so is there anyone here who wishes to testify in favor of the placement of this pole? There isn't. Is there anyone here to testify in opposition to the placement of this pole? There is not. So we'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board with regard to the pole installation on Park Street?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant the pole request.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the installation of a new light pole on Park Street. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. You're all set?
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good night.
Okay, next item on the agenda is KRD Growers. And KRD Growers is here to get an approval from us for a growing facility down at 89 Parker Street. And it's growing and retail sales, both, down on Parker Street. And Mr. Sargent requested information on the environmental cleanup in the building that was done partly as a result of us giving some tax incentives to the owner, and so that's where we are waiting for that. I understand that a letter was forwarded to town council, so I don't know where we stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, back on the agreement for the abatement of taxes that was entered into back in 2016, provided that the Lemoyne had to undertake certain obligations in connection with the property. They had to have by December 31st of 2018 a response action outcome. I know there's been a lot of response actions. I haven't seen anything that in my mind.
Sure. Do you want to come up and sit down?
Sure, absolutely.
And if you guys would identify yourselves and say where you're from?
I'm Jeff Cunningham. I'm the owner of 89 Parker Street.
How do you do, Mr. Cunningham?
I'm Tom Williamson, Williamson Environmental. I'm the environmental consultant for Mr. Cunningham.
Okay, all right. So,
Yeah, so just the letter, I think the letter, Mr. Chairman, that you're referring to is a January 9, 2018 letter. Is that accurate?
No.
No? Is that a later
Sorry,
letter?
Mr. Chair, if I may, that letter that we have is from the lease, the buyer,
Okay.
not from Mr. Cunningham's property owner. So this was from the company that's looking to go into that establishment. So I think it was just their assessment on their business interests, but I think with Mr. Cunningham being the property owner, could better explain what was done on the property instead of the buyer.
I mean, just, the obligation was to have a response action outcome by December 31st of 2018. That's, I mean, I haven't seen anything to represent that that's been done. That would be my one question.
Okay. Tom, do you want to go through what we've done and where we stand?
Sure. So I'll kind of go through a little bit about
Sure.
what we have done and where we are. So as far as the DEP is concerned with regulatory timeframes, we are in compliance and up to date with our next DEP submittal due in June of this year. A lot of work's been done at the site. We've removed some of the oil-saturated wood floors and concrete. We did targeted excavation through the smear zone and took out some impacted soils and disposed of those soils. We've removed and disposed of about 530 gallons of oil that was recovered during this work. We've installed some recovery trenches in the excavation. We also installed a 60-foot long slurry wall parallel to the Rigby Brook culvert. That was kind of to help with the integrity of the culvert and give us some area to work in. We installed some recovery wells, engaging points, and we've done a bunch of surface water, indoor air, soil, and groundwater testing. Now, that's everything that's been done. As far as removal actions and excavation and that type of work, we are done at this point. It's just a matter of follow-up testing of soil and groundwater and indoor air as well. Mr. Cunningham is in the process of clearing out equipment and other things in the building so that we can get in there and clean that building up. We've got years and years of manufacturing dust and whatnot in there, so we get that cleaned up, and we are slated in February, March, which is the time frame DEP asked for indoor air sampling. We're going to do that indoor air sampling. Excuse me. We've got a comprehensive groundwater and surface water, another round to do, and then we'll be submitting the required reports to DEP for June 7th.
And when you, just a quick question, so, and when you do those action items that you just outlined, is that what then gets you to the designation that would be the response action outcome
Yeah.
for DEP?
So what used to be the response action outcome is now called a permanent solution.
Right.
Because of
Under the
regulatory
right.
changes.
Right.
So we will, that's where our target for the June 7th is the permanent solution.
There's no more work on the site to be done. I've done everything that I said I was going to do. At this point, we're working with the LSP and Mass DEP, and I believe we had to get the EPA involved to get a new number because the soil on the site needs to be shipped out of the country up to Quebec. So we had to get the EPA involved, which took about 6 months.
So based upon the timeline that you just outlined, so your estimate then you would have that permanent solution around June of this year?
Correct.
okay. So, where does that
Just for
leave
the
us?
board, Mr. Chairman, so once they obtain that permanent solution, which in the agreement that we had is referred to as, the gentleman mentioned, a response action outcome, once they obtain that satisfies the obligations of what they had to do when they were at the agreement with the town from 2016.
Okay, all right. Remind me of where we were. Are we at the point where we're going to recommend that you, or not recommend that you develop an agreement with KRD, or has an agreement been developed? I don't recall.
No,
We don't have an agreement, okay.
No, yeah, there isn't an agreement, but the board hasn't given that direction to move to that next step.
Okay, because we were awaiting this.
Right.
All right, okay. Well, I guess this is my feeling on the matter. I mean, I did notice, from my reading of the document that was submitted, sort of made my eyes cross because it's not my area of expertise, but it did seem to indicate that nothing had been approved yet by DEP or for the use of this building. Is that correct?
I think you actually need that permanent solution, correct?
That's the end point with
That's the
DEP,
end point.
yes.
But it's not here yet.
Not till June.
No,
Not till June.
Can
Okay.
I also jump in for a second? I just want to clarify a couple of things, and that's what Tom's saying, the LSP saying is correct, and we have to listen to that, but I just want you to know that we've been testing at that site every other month. There's no more hazardous waste going into Rigby, to the best of my knowledge, in the last 3 tests that we've done, there's no more pollutants or waste going into Rigby Brook. That's the first time in 30 years. Our air quality has been tested a number of times, numerous times. All of it is within standard for Mass DEP. There's no restriction. People can walk in there. There's no hazardous material in the air. That's probably the first time in a very long period of time. So everything that needed to be done to clean up that site is done. They're gonna continue testing, and they're gonna test again, and then they're gonna test again. The biggest hang-up that we've run into is the soil underneath the floor. When we dug up the floor, turned out the soil was worse than we thought, and we can't dispose of it in the country. We have to send it up out of the country, which again, we needed permission from the EPA to get it up there, and that took quite a while to do. But everything's done over there.
Right, okay. But just to continue, you know, the DEP nor anyone else has yet certified this property clear or clean of just let me finish.
Yeah.
Clean of the contaminants. From what everybody says and from reading the document, it appears that probably they will do that. They haven't done it yet. So what's before us tonight is whether to recommend that KRD growers and our town council engage in negotiations with regards to an agreement for placement of the facility. I mean, it seems to me we can do that pending the approval by DEP, and I would just go on to mention that the majority of the risk here is being borne by KRD growers. I mean, if they invest a lot of time and money in a building that is not going to be safe for cultivation of marijuana or sale of marijuana, then they have lost. And I think that there will be opportunities for the town in the future, should the certification or whatever it's called from DEP not come through, to not go forward with this project. I mean, isn't one of the last steps, the Department, the Board of Health would have to approve?
I'm not sure.
I think one of the last steps
That's all
is-
at the state level. The state level, there's a lot of hurdles they're gonna get through at the state
Yeah,
level
yeah.
before they can get a final.
So, all I'm saying is it would be my inclination, if the board wishes to go ahead and recommend that KRD growers go ahead and begin developing an agreement with town council. But, so that's my opinion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
I think the town's interest in the matter that we're discussing is between the town and the property owner. I think that they've made substantive progress meeting the requirements that were part of the tax abatement agreement. If they fail to complete that in an acceptable time frame, they're putting their financial benefit from the abatement at risk. I don't, they've demonstrated that they're making forward progress and they'll get it done. I don't think the fact that they don't have that final document should impede the KRD, the applicant, for the community host agreement.
Right,
So,
I agree.
If it's appropriate at this time, and there may be other discussion, but I'd like to make a motion that we take the next step and ask the town council and the town administrator to work out a community host agreement with KRD growers.
So a motion's
That's a
made.
motion.
Yeah, motion's made to authorize the town council to negotiate a community host agreement with KRD growers. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just under discussion, I will be voting for this, just so you can go ahead with your agreement, but I will need a letter stating from the state or the final solution for my final vote on this matter. I'm going to need that letter on behalf of the taxpayers of the town of Clinton. I can't just vote yes without any paperwork from the state or from the higher ups, from the environmental people. But I will be voting yes to go, so you guys can go forward, so you can sit down with the town solicitor to come up with an agreement.
Any other discussion?
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, so we'll be holding off until June? We're not expecting a letter till June?
Mr. Chairman, the motion before the board is to take the next step.
Right,
The motion.
yeah, so we're not
Well, the
making
board
it,
was just to sit down with the town solicitor to come up with an agreement.
right.
Right. That would be a future matter for this board to consider once the agreement is made, whether or not we're going to approve it at that time, with or without the letter.
Okay.
It's a different question for a different time.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, just have a question for Mr. Cunningham. You said there was 3 tests done on the site. How long of a period was that? Like you said, the 3 tests, was that over a year? Was it 6 months? Was it in a month?
Since I purchased the property, which was several years ago, there's been tests done on a regular basis, whether it's quarterly, some are quarterly, some are monthly.
Okay.
When you first take a look at the tests, when I first acquired the property, there was air quality issues, there was oil in the
Right.
wells, there was asbestos, there was...
Yeah, I know that site was pretty heavily contaminated, so, I give you guys credit going in there and doing the work you did. I mean, obviously, it's your
Yeah,
investment, you're looking to clean it up, so I think it's a
Since
win-win.
then, probably for the last year, roughly 1 year, there hasn't been any hazardous material over there.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting when we say we don't have anything from the state. All of our tests results are posted on the state website.
Right,
Anyone can go on there and take a look, and you can see that we've tested
right.
every quarter, and you can look at the results. So someone told me the other day that they were concerned about the water over at the building. We have town water. There's no water issues or hazardous material in the water. We put in a slurry wall along Rigby Brook, and there isn't any contamination. We tested that 2 or 3 times. And every time we test it, it's not a cheap or quick or easy thing to test that thing. I don't know if anyone knows what you have to do to go test that,
Mm.
but it isn't quick and easy. We do it at the front of the brook, we do it under our building, we send in cameras, we do tests, we test the soil, and we have to do this, and we have to submit all the results to Mass DEP.
Right.
The person at Mass DEP who's overseeing this, her name is Rebecca Woolley. I personally go down and talk to Rebecca on a regular basis. I saw her in November
Yeah.
or December, and she congratulated me on cleaning up a site.
No, you
She
guys
said-
done a lot of work down there, I know.
It's one of the few, she's been to the building a handful of times, and she wants to go ahead and talk about what a great job we did on that site.
I think maybe you can use it for a case study.
Well, actually, she wanted to come out, she wanted to bring, there's an attorney in Boston
Yeah.
that she works with, and they wanted to come out to the site because I think part of the final resolution is we're gonna put some restrictions on the deed. You can't put certain things on the property in the future.
Right.
And she said, you've done a good job on that, and we want to work with you to see if we can't put the least restrictive deed restriction on that property.
Mm.
And anyways,
Yeah.
we started running into issues with the EPA trying to get some type of a permission to bring that soil off-site. And again, it was just a difficult process. But anyways, if anyone wants to see any of the results, when you say like Mass DEP approval, I don't know if we ever get their final approval. I think we submit it, and then they have like 30 or 90 days to come out and do an audit and reject it. So it's not like we're waiting for them to come out and do some type of an inspection. We self-inspect, and we self-inspect at least every 90 days.
Yeah.
And all of those results are posted on the Mass DEP website, and if you look for the last year, you're gonna see that all of our tests, every test that was done in the building is below or within acceptable range. I don't know the legal terminology or the technical terminology, but we don't have any restrictions. It's a relatively pretty clean site.
Is there any way you can get a letter submitted from that person from the DEP?
From Rebecca Woolley, what would you want it to say?
Well, I'm just saying you did all this work. I need documents. I need paperwork. Yes, everybody can say, we did this, I did this, I need documents. I need paperwork.
Mr. Chair.
Well, anyway, the issue before the board is not whether or not the property on, is it Parker,
Parker Street.
Parker Road, Parker Street, is going to be approved. That's up to DEP and everybody else. The
Right.
issue is, do we want to go forward with this agreement?
That's all the questions I had, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I suspect that this project is going to go forward and that this property is going to be deemed safe. It's not deemed safe yet, but I don't think that should stop us from going forward with this agreement. Are there any more discussion?
We're just not going, they're gonna sit down and come up with it. We don't have an agreement now.
No.
We do not.
Yes, thank you.
Any more discussion? There being none, all in favor of Mr.
Aye.
Connolly's
Aye.
motion? Aye, and opposed, motion's carried. So good luck to you guys. And,
I also just like to
Good
say
work.
that, thank you for your help over the last few years with the tax abatement. I believe it's been successful. It's been successful, I believe, for the cleanup of the building. I think it's been successful for Clinton. The value of that building's gonna go up. It's gonna help the tax base. It's gonna help pay for school expenses and public services. And we have a piece of property that's now environmentally better off. The whole community is better because of that cleanup.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Continuing with our green initiative. Next item on the agenda is Crabgrass LLC marijuana cultivation facility. They also are looking for a community host agreement, and that was put off last week until we could hear from town council that they have met all the required documents have been submitted as outlined in the policy that we adopted a few weeks ago, so.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I took a look at the documents. I didn't evaluate them for substance, but it appears that, they've satisfied the requirements of the submittals.
Okay.
I did pull, they are valid, Massachusetts corporation, so I pulled that information today, so. It appears
And
all
this
approved
is
there.
crabgrass cultivation, this is purely cultivation. This is the,
Well, there'll be oil processing as well.
and oil processing, right, but you're not going to be
No,
retail
it's-
sales or, okay. So, town council says that it appears they have met all the requirements. What's the pleasure of the board with regards to the community host agreement?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we request town council and town solicitor to negotiate a community host agreement with
Crabgrass
Crabgrass
LLC.
LLC.
Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded to authorize the town council to negotiate with Crabgrass LLC and the development of a community host agreement for marijuana cultivation and oil extraction. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried, so the town council will be busy. Administrative business is the next item on the agenda, and we have late night closings for February 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the late-night closings, and if any other establishment comes forward, the police chief can give them permission.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the late-night closings, which are for Clem's Liberty Tavern, Clinton Turn Vereen, the Crystal Cafe, the Old Timer, Ringside Cafe, the Simple Man Saloon, and the Spruce Streets Tavern. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Old and new business, host community agreement for Emerald City Growers. As people might recall at the last meeting, there was some concern about the nature of the agreement and also the request, which was taken back, to split the processing fee. At that time, a motion to accept the community host agreement failed as a result of a 2-to-2 vote. Mr. Iacobacci was not here, and I suggested that they may want to come back and try again, and I just have a technical question. Would our first act to be to see if we want to reconsider last meeting's vote, or
You can just move forward. I mean,
you can just move forward?
yeah, I know, as a chairman, you put the item is on the agenda.
Okay,
The fact that the hearing took, it's not a statutory public hearing, it's just an agenda item. So you have,
Right.
you have a right to revisit it and take another
Right,
vote
okay.
if the board so chooses.
right, okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
if I may, I'd like to make a motion that the board accept the terms and conditions of the community host agreement and authorize the letter of what is it?
Non-opposition.
Non-opposition be drafted and given to the applicant.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Motion seconded by Mr. Iacobacci. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just under discussion, like I said in the last other meetings, I cannot vote for this because the Drug Task Force and Clinton Police Department have been down at that property before, kicking in the doors, and I don't feel comfortable voting yes on this issue. So I will be voting no.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so the vote that the board has taken, is that the version of the community host agreement, is it as amended?
As amended,
Okay.
yeah. So the issue was that there was no agreement to be supportive of community activities, and there was the issue of the $5,000, which we thought was settled, but anyway, so it's as amended. So,
Emerald City.
Yeah, Emerald City Growers has agreed to make community donations for the Mass Central Rail Trail project, May Barton Community Gardens, Wheat, and I guess whoever else that they wish to and will make application. So that's the amended agreement. Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor of Mr. Connolly's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
So motion carries 3-2, so I guess you are ready to go to your next step. Mr. Sergeant, were you going to say something?
I just said go.
Oh, good luck. Oh, all right. Okay. All right, where are we here? City Growers. Oh, the Board of Selectmen last weekend, actually, was somewhat cut short as a result of the storm, attended the MMA annual conference. At that conference, there's many workshops and presentations, and we said this week that we would discuss providing a briefing on the issues presented at the MMA annual conference in Boston. So I guess that's where we are, and I would open it to the board to see if they wish to do that and how they would like to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm supportive of doing that, but I would like to say that I'm not prepared to do that tonight.
No, yeah, me neither. I could wing it, but
Well, I could wing it too.
I was actually thinking that if we sort of wrote up our notes in brief summary.
Oh, you're gonna give us homework now?
No. I mean, I don't care if you want to talk about it at the next meeting, it's fine with me. But it's just my idea, which you're free to reject. Because far be it from me to try to put it down anybody's throat. That if we just wrote up our notes, we could put it on the webpage and be done with it. But if you'd rather discuss it,
Um,
I'm open to any suggestions.
Well, whoever wants to write them up can write them up, and whoever wants to do it verbally can do it verbally.
I would appreciate the opportunity to be brief and concise and just share the basic ideas that I picked up while
Orally?
I was down there
Here at the meeting?
orally with the board,
Okay,
a board discussion.
that's all right with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody's opposed to that,
I'm not.
as opposed to my poor idea?
Well, I picked up stuff that would be easily
Yeah, yeah.
drafted into notes from some of the workshops, but I learned other things in informal discussions with other public
Public
officials.
officials, yeah.
And I'd like to share that
Okay,
informally.
all right. Okay, so that's what we'll do at the next meeting? Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is goals and objectives. There any goals and objectives discussion? The only thing I would say is the Business District Revitalization Committee is meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock here in the town, so I expect that we would have some report next week, or in 2 weeks. If there's nothing else on goals and objectives, any committee reports?
Before you go to committee reports,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, under old and new business, I would like to just bring up for a future meeting and hopefully fairly soon, future meeting, discussion regarding any consideration of revising the marijuana bylaw. Well, one thing is that we've basically signed off on or we've indicated approval going forward for the only 2 retail licenses that are allowed by our bylaw. And the process for amending the bylaw, I think, takes a little bit of time. I think the planning board has to have a public hearing on it and give their recommendation in a certain timeline prior to annual town meeting. So I'd like to see if we could get it as a discussion item and maybe even have the planning board or the economic development director here to give us their insight on whether or not it'd be worth proposing amendments to the bylaw.
Okay. Does anybody object to that? So without an objection, we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Anything on committee reports?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the Marketing and Communications Subcommittee met last night. It was a great meeting. We actually had some citizen input, and Mr. Duffy stopped by. We took the goals and objectives that the board approved at a recent meeting and assigned them. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people come up with. We're going to try and meet on the 4th Tuesday of every month. And we also had a spirited conversation about snow removal. I know it's on everybody's mind with the recent storm, but just our 45-minute, hour-long talk about it showed how complicated an issue it is. So I know I've heard from a lot of people, as I'm sure everyone else has. It's a puzzle with many pieces, as I think I've said before. We're working on communication now, but I think to make some lasting changes, it's going to take some, looking at the culture in town and how far we want to go with that. And then on the other side, which we didn't even scratch the surface, is enforcement and enacting any kind of DPW changes if we need new equipment or new personnel, how far we want to go with what the town does. And as we mentioned at other meetings, with vacant properties and state-owned properties, it's a lot more complicated than people think. But we had a great first discussion, and I've been in contact with the DPW superintendent, and we're going to keep grinding. So if any members of the board want to offer their opinions or comments, I'm all ears, and I will keep you posted as we go forward.
Okay. Anything else on committee reports? If there isn't, that appears to conclude our business for this evening. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. And we are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, could we take a couple minutes?
Sure.